Welcome back to the second part of our Stripology demo with the Huckleberry's crew. So this is the first one I'm going to show you is, again, it's using the extra large, and the reason I'm using this one is I'm working with the 60-degree line here, and in the second cutting I'm going to use both lines. So why would we use the first one? That's for triangles or for diamonds. Here's my strip. I've actually made it handy here to lay it. That you don't need this kind of mat to do that, but it's just handy because it's pre-marked with the 60-degree line. I'm going to set my ruler on it. Now I'm lining up my 60-degree line along with the strip. At the same time, though, you can see if I cut here, I'm cutting off this strip. I've got to scoot this up to make sure I catch the selvage. So any dots we want to get rid of as well, depending on how heavy your selvage cuts are. And then my strip width is 2.5 inches, which means my cuts are 2.5 inch intervals. So if I was doing a 1.5 inch strip, I'd be doing 1.5 inch intervals. I could do 6 inch ones and do 6 inch intervals. It would just take more sliding the fabric out. So I cut it at 0, 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15. Will I get the last one? Yeah. Wow, that was close. Okay, and those are 2.5 inch diamonds from the 2.5 inch cut. Okay, now if you want to see the difference, this is from a 2 inch strip, and that's from a 1.5 inch strip. Now I could do 1 inch ones, and I could also continue going up. Okay, and I would, of course, with this ruler, you're going to use 1/2 inch intervals because I don't want to figure out those 1/4 inch ones in this case, which I showed you for the binding. Okay, now these ones up here, you could also do a strip set. So this is 1.5 inch strips sewn together, so that equals 2.5, and then you would do the same cutting of 2.5 inch intervals, and then your diamonds would look like that, two-tone. You could do 3 strips together, and your interval would be as wide as your strip set. All right. Now, Strip to Shore is made with, it was totally made with this ruler actually, and all the cuts that you see there, whether it was these, what they considered the trapezoid cuts, because there's 2 different directions, and the cuts that are in each of the blocks. And that was from a 2.5 inch, or from a jelly roll. So, online, here's the chart. That's, if you're wondering, that's the biggest thing you'll need. I couldn't do it without this chart. So your finished hexagon sizes are listed here, and your strip width is here. So we are doing 2.5, which seems to be that classic measurement, especially when we work with our pre-cuts. So lining that up again the same way I showed you. Oh, my strip is, there we go. Okay. And again, making sure that I slide it up to include my selvage edge, which is sitting out there. So I'm going to slide it up far enough to catch that. Okay, now this is where I got to go to the chart, and it says make the 3 first cuts, 0, 7, and 14. So sideways in, so 0, 7, and 14. Now I could mark the 7 and the 14. I could even mark the 0 with 3, with say purple stickers, because then we have to make a second cut. Now I have to take this away, and then I'm going to turn this a little bit. So what I need to do now is I need to fit this cut. Oops, and I just slid this one off the rail there. I have it already lined up. We're good. Okay, so now what I'm doing is I am fitting so I've got to lift my ruler up so I don't disturb my fabric underneath, which I did a little. So now I'm sliding that so you can see I've got it lined up on top. I'm going to scoot it in till it fits right into that corner. And now that 60 degree is on the other side of my strip. Now, tendency would be to here, cut it 0. We don't want to do that because I'd have just a triangle and I'd ruin it. So now we look at what this says. It tells you how to do it. Now we cut it 2, 9, and 16. So it's really odd to be cutting this way looking at your fabric, but trust the cuts. So 2, 9, and 16. Works perfect for that. You're going to see when you get larger the hexagons, it will not work out as well as that one did. And then look at that, 1, 2. I actually got 10 out of that strip. Oops, must have missed the last cut on that one. So I've got ones that will make your 4-inch half hexagons, or your 4-inch hexagons if you sewed them together. And that's exactly how that pattern got made, except the cuts, she would have had a little different lengthwise because we needed a longer length. So like I said, that's all on her video, but the chart is available. She's got a list of the binding cuts and the extra large cuts for the 60-degree lines on the hexagon, for the hexagons. Other thing I want to show you, on the long ruler, we can cut fat quarters really efficiently with this. And if any of you have ever done the yellow brick road pattern, the cuts are 6.5. I've just written them down here. 6.5, 3.5, 3.5, and 3.5. So what you would do, because all the fat quarters get cut the same. So fat quarter is half your width. So the nice part of that, you're only folding it in half once. So same idea, you're going to lay that on a straight line under your ruler. You're going to place it, and again, I could do more than one. I could do four fat quarters easily on top of each other. I would line it up under my line, and I cut it 0, and then I've marked it for those cuts. So 6.5, 10.5, because that's a 3.5-inch piece from here to here. 13, whoops, did I do that right? 6.5, 7.5, 8.5, 10, sorry. These have been moved around twice. So 10, 13.5, and then 17. And those would be my cuts for my yellow brick road. For all of my, and then my subcuts can actually be done the same way. If I had a pattern like this Himalayan pink, and I've done this one up before, and it was fat quarters as well, I actually wrote, here's the cutting. They show you a picture. I rated my patterns, Stripology Ruler cuts, 7.5, 0 obviously, 7.5, 12, 14.5, 16, and 17.5 will give me my 7.5, 4.5, 2.5, 1.5, and 1.5 inch cuts. Okay. Always refer to the pattern though to make sure you're cutting them the right way. Your selvage edge will indicate length of a fat quarter. Sometimes they'll have you cut the opposite way. More often it seems to be with the length, so you'll always have a selvage exposed there. And if I was cutting a fat quarter up into pieces, because I don't know what else to do with it, you can actually cut 2 10-inch squares. This was a fat quarter, this is why I'm showing it to you instead of cutting it. I could cut it at 10 inches. So I would get 2 10-inch squares, and this is if I'm wanting just to supplement my stash. And I would get 3 2.5-inch strips, or I could get 2 2.5, and a 1.5. But I'd try to be more efficient. And these, of course, are half strips. So you might have patterns that call for those. That's only if you're wanting to cut up your fat quarters and add to your bins. Which brings me to how do I cut my fabrics. So if you've got big pieces of fabric and you're not sure how to cut them, I always try, and if it's bigger than the 10 inches, I try to keep them. I just have them in a bin. But here is, there's a piece of fabric there. So the full extra large one, it'll allow you to cut, there's 20 inches there, okay? That's about 1/2 meter of fabric. But what I do want to show you now is we're going to switch over, and I said we would talk about the Stripology squared one. And here's my Stripology squared. And the reason I'm doing this, I just want to cut 10-inch squares. So fast to cut 10-inch squares. Okay, so the same folding, and that's already been done. Hopefully we're fairly straight again. I'm going to line this up along this edge. I'm going to press that out with my hand, holding onto this because I don't want to lose that edge. And remember, let's make sure, and then I'm going to gently pull it towards me as evenly as I can. And I'm going to stop it so that I can get the selvage edge covered, and then a straight edge again up there. Now, I'm doing 10-inch squares. This doesn't matter if I'm not parallel anymore because I'm actually going to be cutting eventually inside that. So those wows that can happen won't happen with your 10-inch squares or your 5-inch squares. So just something to know, but it's just a good habit to get into to be even. Checking again, make sure I can catch all of it. I want the max amount. I use black for my white fabric, and I'm going to cut at 0. and 10. Now remember, so the darker lines are indicating the even, so there's my 10-inch square, the even inches. There we go. Okay, now I've got this piece left over. I'm going to know that's a 10-inch strip, and I'm just going to pull that aside. I've got this piece here. I don't want to leave that right now, so I'm going to put it under my ruler. Now remember my little trick, pushing down on your fabric and butting it into that cut edge, which should be straight. Okay, now you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to do another 10-inch square or strip. Now, if I was cutting this and had no purpose for it, I actually like the idea of having a bin with just 10-inch strips. Why? That is 4 10-inch squares. Or if I put this ruler, and this is where this ruler comes in super handy for 10-inch pieces, I can do a 5-inch strip and a 5-inch strip. So in one 5-inch strip, I have 8 5-inch squares. So that would be 16 5-inch squares just from all that. Or I could do one 5-inch strip, 2 2.5-inch strips, or that's 4 2.5-inch strips. So you can see why I might not want to cut it right now because I don't know what I want to do. So I might leave that one and start a bin that has just 10-inch pieces in it. And then this one here is where I want to cut into squares. Now if I cut right now, remember we covered that selvage? This is something I want to point out because I've done this more than once. If I cut, I could easily cut into the selvage and not have a 10-inch square. So I flip it over at this point. Okay, and I'm going to be cutting this way. What I can do is I can just slide it over a little bit so I don't lose. But with 10-inch squares and 44 inches, you're not worrying about that fabric. My first cut now, I want to make sure, again, I like that black line. Okay, there's my selvage. This one's over here and this one's about here. Okay, so let's go there. And I got to make sure I can get the 10 inches. So I want to look at my 10-inch mark there as well. Sometimes I'll have an extra bit fairly wide and I'll throw that into a bin of even cuts that are ready to go for string quilts or whatever you like to do with your evenly cut pieces. Sideways in, 10, and then those are my scraps, but I have now 4 10-inch squares. So that's 4. There's 42 in a layer cake, so you'd only need 11 fabrics, and you could make up your own 10-inch squares. Then what I've got are bins that hold. So last week, this is a good thing to do while you're watching TV. Curling's on, and those of you who know me, I'll watch lots of the curling, but I like to do 2 things at once. So these are all the ones I need to sort through. How do I sort through them? Well, right now I have batik ones, and notice that this is the cardboard from the layer cakes, which is a great way to separate them. And then my bottom ones are there's neutrals. They're grays, kind of creams, blacks. I just set them together right now. Whether I split them up later, possibly, but until I get more, that's how I'm going to store those. Okay. And I mentioned these bins before. I love these bins. They stack really well. Then I've got bins of, so this says 1.5 inch, smaller pieces, not full width. And this one is my 1.5 inch strips. So I've got them in elastics right now. These smaller containers work well. Then I can fold them twice and sort them by color. So these have to get put in. And remember those little bits you cut off at the end? They work perfectly. I've got 2.5 inch strips in this one. So I'm just doing them by color right now. It's amazing how much fabric you have there, but it folds up nicely in your sewing juice. This one, 5-inch pieces that I didn't want to cut up. So similar to my 10-inch one, I've got a bin where they're just 5-inch. So I can do squares, or I can do 2 2.5-inch strips. So I've got access if I'm wanting to do up my own fabric selection that I can go into those. The other thing I would do with my bits, and this pile here I've got, and I've sort of organized them there, up to 9 to 10 inches in length, but random widths, but they're even. I've trimmed them all even. This was 10 to 15 inch ones, and this is 15 inch, and then I've got these all wrapped up, and I've just been cutting those while watching TV. What happens with those? That's just coming from all your odds and sods that are weird shapes, and that's a great way to get into all of your fabrics that look like this And then you start going, what am I going to do with them? Okay, something like this, I'd probably do 5-inch squares, but I probably would try and get the bird in there. And maybe my other little bits might go into my bin of my string quilt or my scrap quilt bin. So that's how I'll get through this. This was all done last week, so it really didn't take that long to do. All right,